Have you been having strange dreams? In April of 2020, strange flyers began popping up around Utah asking people this very question. Nobody knows where the flyers came from or who exactly was collecting information on these dreams. And on top of that, this is not the first time flyers like this have shown up. Today, we explore the strangeness of the Happy Valley Dream Survey. Welcome back to another episode of Down with the Strangeness, the show where every single week we dive into another piece of strangeness. I'm your host, Ben. I'm excited to be back for another episode. Thank you, everyone, for joining me again as we get down with the strangeness. We spent last month, October, talking about some spookier stuff. I hope you all enjoyed those episodes. I'm really trying to cover a wide variety of strangeness on this podcast, and your feedback and suggestions really do helped me out a lot. I've switched up some episode formats, I've changed up some subject matter, and all of that while just trying to keep the focus on the strange. But this week, it's time for us to go less into the spooky, but no less into the strange, the type of stuff this podcast is all about. Today, we're talking about a fun one. Today, we're going to cover the Happy Valley Dream Survey. Have you been having strange dreams? Who doesn't from time to time? Well, in April of 2020, flyers were discovered in Utah asking that very question. The flyers read, "Have you been having strange dreams? The Happy Valley Dream Survey is investigating a recent spike in bizarre, unexplainable dreams. If you've been experiencing any unusual dream activity, you can help by reporting a summary." It goes on to list an email address and a phone number that those of you who watch or listen on YouTube will be able to see on your screen right now. And it encourages people to leave a description of their dream using that email or in that voicemail when you call the number. Now, before we get too deep into the namesake of today's story, the Happy Valley Dream Survey, it's important to the overall story to acknowledge that this is not the first instance of these flyers showing up randomly. 5 years earlier, in April of 2015, very similar flyers were discovered in Portland, Oregon. So similar, in fact, that there were only two differences in the flyers. The ones from 2015 had only a phone number, no email, and the 2015 survey went by a different name, the Willamette Valley Dream Survey. Another minor difference that I didn't think to mention was that this Willamette survey had a different phone number from the one on the Happy Valley flyers in 2020. When you actually call the number on the Willamette Valley Dream Survey, which is still active if you're interested in joining the strangeness of this one, but when you call the number on the Willamette Valley Dream Survey, this is the recording that you hear.
Thank you for calling the Willamette Valley Dream Survey. Please leave a detailed account of your dream after the tone. Transcripts or audio from your report may be duplicated in other media.
That's it. Then you just leave your dream in the message, and it's off to be used for whatever this whole thing is about. And we'll dive deeper into some of that stuff when we start getting into the theories and possible solves to this story. But speaking of diving deeper, the Oregonian actually picked this up, and they ran a very short little story about the Willamette Valley Dream Survey. This article linked the phone number to a German language immersion school, which had one of its 3 locations in Portland. But school officials reported that they had not been in control or use of that number in a very long time, with the school director saying, "All we do is German, but I can see why you're checking into this. That's one weird poster." But the air quotes investigation didn't end there. As with almost anything that we'll cover on this podcast that is this recent in history, the story gained some traction on Reddit. And these internet detectives from Reddit and other social media groups went to work trying to figure all this out. And they did make another German connection right there in Portland. The nonprofit company Futel was linked to the Willamette Valley Dream Survey. Futel is, like I said, a nonprofit company that actually provides free-to-use payphones in cities such as Portland. And these Futel payphones have directories that you can use, like press 1 for this, press 2 for that. And of the many odd listings in the Futel directory, I would encourage you to look into some of those if you're interested. One of them just happened to be the Willamette Valley Dream Survey. So we may circle back to this when we talk about some of the theories, but ultimately, as far as hard evidence for solving this thing goes, we have nothing. The Willamette Valley Dream Survey, that story survived on Reddit, but had pretty much cooled off over the next couple years until everything kicked back up in April of 2020 with the discovery of the Happy Valley Dream Survey flyers in Utah. And you remember I said how similar these flyers were. YouTube listeners and watchers will be able to see them side by side for comparison. I played the Willamette Valley recording earlier. Now I want to play the recording you hear when you call the Happy Valley Dream Survey.
Please leave a detailed description of your dream at the tone.
So that one is not nearly as personal or detailed. It's much more robotic, possibly even a text-to-speech bot on this one compared to the very human voice of the Willamette Valley survey. But when you call this number, after leaving your message, many users received a thank you text message saying, "Thank you for leaving a voicemail and participating in the Happy Valley Dream Survey." Other users even reported receiving calls back from that number, but they did mention that oftentimes when that number called, it would only ring briefly and then hang up, usually before they were able to ever answer it. A few users received strange messages telling them they were not in the appropriate region to participate in the survey, and all of these claims are backed up and supported by screenshots and call logs, again, posted on Reddit. Now, this tiny amount of response from the new number, this little bit of interaction you get from whoever's on the other side of these surveys, compared to, or I guess paired with, the similarities to the Willamette Valley survey, they provide a bit of a fire to those Reddit investigators that we mentioned earlier. And just as with any topic on Reddit, some users get more carried away than others. Two Reddit users specifically, one Reggie and Aliens Caused 9/11, started to get into very involved investigations. They began collaborating their efforts with each other as well as others, while they called the number, sent text messages, even created burner emails just to interact with the Dream Survey. Based on the massive and detailed Reddit posts they were making, which I spent a lot of time going through while I was researching this episode, it looks like they were making pretty decent progress learning more about the Happy Valley Dream Survey. Even if they were lacking a solution, they were discovering more. These users were the source for almost all the visual materials that I'm using for this section of the episode. Again, for the people watching on YouTube, they were able to get most of the only non-automated feeling responses that I saw as well, including one that I found initially to be the low-key scariest message sent, which said, "I'm sorry, but my responses are limited. You must ask the right questions." Now, users who received this "ask the right questions" message began trying to figure out what that question was. And the Reddit investigation by these users were able to land on some right questions, not just one, right? They would answer different questions. And the people that landed on the quote-unquote right question, they received odd, cryptic responses, as well as responses that they interpreted to be mildly threatening. These Reddit investigators were spooked enough to go through periods of time where they would block the number because they had gotten weird calls and texts at weird times of day, in addition to feeling a little unsafe. If you follow the series of edits on their posts, on a long but great Reddit post by one Reggie, you see that this entire investigation, they're kind of running through highs and lows, times where they're so afraid that they begin blocking the number and distancing themselves, and then times they feel where it's just some dumb prank or hoax by somebody with far too much time on their hands. The final edit to the thread that I followed from one Reggie said, quote, "Edit 11. Well, me and several others on a Discord server have been trying to unravel all this, and we've found many pieces of info. I'll likely make an update post later, but this is getting really weird." End quote. But there would be no update post. User 1 Reggie, as well as Aliens Caused 9/11, both essentially vanished. Their Reddit accounts were deleted seemingly overnight, along with a lot of the alleged proof and evidence towards figuring this whole thing out. And while others have continued to investigate and theorize, we're not left with too much more in terms of concrete evidence after the, we'll say, mysterious end of this Reddit investigation. So that leaves us wondering, who's behind the Happy Valley Dream Survey? Are they the same people behind the Willamette Valley Dream Survey? And why are they even doing this? As with most topics we'll cover on this show, we are at no loss for theories about the truth, so let's go ahead and get into a few of those theories that look to explain the Happy Valley Dream Survey. The first and possibly obvious answer is that it's simply all a hoax. A prank cooked up by some random person that maybe just became bigger than they intended. Maybe Willamette Valley was a prank and the person had so much fun that they did it over in Happy Valley, but that would require some travel. So maybe Reddit users in Utah wanted to spice things up for themselves, right? After seeing the Willamette Valley post, why should Portland have all the fun, right? Now this is automatically where a lot of people are going to go. This doubt, thinking that it's all fake, which isn't necessarily wrong, but where's the fun in thinking that way? There are definitely some aspects of the story that conflict with this simple explanation. And this whole podcast is about, at the very minimum, entertaining the strangeness of everything. So what are some more open-minded, yet equally plausible explanations for all this? One theory that I'm actually a big fan of, and I think that it's a great compromise for the everything is a hoax kind of people and the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists. But what if this isn't about the dreams themselves? It's been theorized that these dream surveys are some form of art project, like perhaps using dreams as motivation for paintings and other artwork, or more specifically, the one that I buy into, is something like a writer struggling with writer's block, looking for their next story. If you remember, the recording of the Willamette Valley survey mentioned that transcripts or audio from dream reports may be duplicated in other media. And I don't know about you, but taking people's dreams and turning them into novels, comic books, maybe even movies and TV shows, that sounds like an excellent way to get ideas without owing any reimbursement or credit to the person who originally had the idea. Another theory, and this one is a big step away from art project, is that the Happy Valley Dream Survey is connected to a doomsday cult. Now stay with me. Do you remember when I mentioned the text messages? The Dream Survey responses claim to be looking for the right question. And while multiple questions were deemed to be the right one, there was essentially only one response when the right question was asked. 9 go 5 jit. That's the number 9 GOEH, the number 5 JIT. A seemingly random alphanumeric gibberish. Running this through things like Google Translate turns up nothing. And in that, I was kind of stuck on this part until I found a YouTube user by the name of Nick Crowley. Shout out to Nick for this next tidbit of information as we go through. And also shout out if Nick is using the Crowley in his username as a reference to Aleister Crowley. And if Crowley just happens to be his real name, then still thank you for this next part, Nick. But new YouTuber Nick Crowley was able to find some obscure translation site that identified 9GOEH as Creole language. The site then translated that Creole to the French word septem, and the French word septem, and I apologize if I'm butchering it, it's SEPTANM, translates to the English word September. So September 5 JIT, JIT, is what we're left with, which was more than enough for Nick to make this next connection. We're going to log back into our Reddit accounts for this one, ladies and gentlemen, because there was a growing movement on Reddit that was branded by some people as a cult. This group, cult, whatever you want to call them, operated their own subreddit called 5 September 2020, and they believed that some type of catastrophic or apocalyptic event would occur on September 5th, 2020. Now, obviously, we know they were wrong, as doomsday cults always are, because as I'm researching this episode, we're already in October of 2021. But how did dream surveys connect to Reddit doomsday cults? The 5 September 2020 cult on Reddit actually seemed to hold dreams in a high regard. If you look through the postings and all the I don't want to call them official beliefs of the group, but it becomes obvious if you spend some time on that subreddit that dreams were deeply ingrained into the belief system and ideology of the cult. They even went so far as to claim that our dreams may contain the secrets to surviving the apocalypse that was to come, and it seems entirely possible to me that a cult could be using the concept of a dream survey to gather intelligence, to recruit members, or possibly even both. The dream connection and the cryptic nature of everything around this seems to line up with stereotypical cult behavior, although I will say, personally, I would expect a cult to be more direct and aggressive with recruiting, as opposed to hiding behind some charade and cryptic codes that needed to be interpreted and cracked. Our last theory is one that gets jammed into everything, but it does make some sense. And that is the theory of, what if this is all part of a government program? Again, stay with me. We know for a fact that the government experimented with LSD during Project MKUltra way back when. And as I said in the last episode where MKUltra came up, I fully believe that the government continued MKUltra beyond the official end date of the program, or they began another program altogether, perhaps an offshoot of the original. But it stands to reason that if they were doing things like this in the past, why would they not be doing things like this in the present? What if the government has continued experiments on U.S. citizens as it did in the days of MKUltra? What if these tests had side effects that impact the person's dreams? If you're conducting an experiment in secret, then gathering data from secret test subjects becomes difficult. But hiding behind a dream survey kind of seems like a creative way to obtain information without sacrificing the integrity of your experiment. And I want to end on a personal theory that hit me as I was researching this episode. I bring this up now because it relates very closely to the theory of the government being involved, but I don't necessarily believe that it's a new and improved MKUltra or anything like that. I don't believe that there are drugs or experiments involved at all. What if the survey is the experiment? For better or for worse, the government is almost always ahead of the curve when it comes to science. And part of science today is exploring things like simulation theory or the possible existence of other dimensions. So what if dreams are possible ways to verify the simulation? Or what if our dreams are simply our minds allowing themselves to enter a higher state of consciousness, perhaps even accessing or transcending into another dimension? And what if the government is trying to study our dreams in an attempt to leverage that data into something else? Maybe an attempt at editing the simulation if we're in one. Maybe creating ways to access other dimensions if they realize they exist. It might sound crazy, but so did MKUltra until it was at least mostly declassified. Unfortunately, when I called and left my dream at the number, I was not met with the same rabbit hole of cryptic messages and clues as others. Perhaps it will come, and if anything develops from this, I'll be sure to share it with everyone, especially on social media. Make sure you're following us, Instagram and Twitter. But maybe I don't want anything more to come from this, because I sure would hate to vanish like Reddit users One Reggie and Aliens Caused 9/11. I would hate to, be the next person that vanishes with all of their content gone for some mysterious reason. So pranksters, struggling artists, doomsday cults, government operations, all possible answers to the question of who is behind these mysterious dream surveys. At the end of the day, we still don't know, but that doesn't mean that we can't still try to figure it out. And like I said, these numbers are still active. If you want to throw yourself into this one, it's a little more ongoing and current than most of the things that we have covered before. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the story of the Happy Valley Dream Survey. That is the end of today's episode. I really hope that you enjoyed this one. It's a fun story with plenty of threads to pull on. As always, you can go deeper, take a deeper dive if you're interested. Like I said, these numbers are still active, so go ahead and see what you get. If you do recall the numbers, leave a voicemail. If you experience anything by participating in this dream survey, reach out, let me know. You can email me downwiththestrangeness@gmail.com. But yeah, there's definitely deeper you can go, but that is the story. That is the gist of the Happy Valley Dream Survey. Perhaps one day we will know the full truth, but for now, it is just fun to kind of theorize. Make sure you subscribe wherever you may be listening. A rating and review on Apple Podcasts means the world to me. Like and comment if you listen or watch via YouTube. That also helps out a lot. As I mentioned earlier, you can send an email to the show, downwiththestrangeness@gmail.com. Follow all the social medias. Check out the website, downwiththestrangeness.com. Links to everything in the show notes. The website links out to everything. I'm not going to bore you with too much promotion. As always, I am your host, Ben. I had a lot of fun doing this one. I'll be back next week with another piece of strangeness, and I'll hope you'll be back to join me. But until then, everybody, keep it strange.